The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hello and welcome to today's webinar, Informational Interviews, How to Access 80% of Jobs That Are Never Posted, offered by the Oregon State University Alumni Association in partnership with Oregon State's Professional and Continuing Education Unit. I'm Greg Aronoff, the Marketing and Communications Manager here with PACE. I'm joined with Yuliya Dennis from the Alumni Association and Ashley Ward from the OSU Office of International Admissions. Welcome and thank you so much for being here. Now, before we get started, I just wanted to go through the agenda for the day. I work for Professional and Continuing Education, which is the non-credit arm of the university. We partner with colleges across campus to offer open enrollment classes to the public on subjects ranging from workforce training to beer and wood science. We're always excited to continue our partnership with Yuliya Dennis from the Alumni Association. And I'm sure some of you have joined us for some of our other webinars on the career series. So we're excited to have Yuliya and Ashley here today to talk about informational interviews. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it off.
Thank you so much, Greg. I'm really excited to be here and to have Ashley present on this really important and valuable topic. So my name is Yuliya Dennis, and I'm Director for Alumni Career Services at the OSU's Alumni Association. And we provide a variety of programs and services for alumni. So if you need your resume reviewed, if you'd like to do a consultation, we have more webinars that we're going to be doing throughout the year. We also have a variety of events and programs. There's also ways for you to volunteer if you want to engage with students or alumni and help other people with their careers. So do reach out to me if you want to be more involved, and I'm always happy to talk with alumni or people who are passionate about helping OSU alumni and students. And I'm really excited to be introducing Ashley Ward. And Ashley is one of our really awesome alumni career ambassadors, and I'm always really happy to work with her on all kinds of events, including the webinars that she's been helping to present. She is an OSU alum from 2011, and she currently works at International University Alliance. So she used to work at OSU in admissions, but now she's with International University Alliance, and she graduated from Oregon State with a Bachelor of Arts in English and a minor in writing. And her work, she specializes in student recruitment, and she enjoys providing access and opportunities to students around the world. I've been very fortunate to work with Ashley, and I love listening to her give advice, and she has a lot of great career wisdom that I'm excited you all get to listen and hear as well. So this webinar will be recorded, and a link will be emailed to you. Do feel free to ask questions throughout in the chat box, and questions will be addressed throughout the webinar. We do want this to be very interactive. There's also going to be a couple of poll questions. So anytime, ask the questions, and then Greg will be checking and making sure that those get addressed throughout the webinar. And next, I want to share a little bit about OSU Alumni Career Services. I shared that there's resources for alumni for resume reviews, consultations, events, things like that, volunteering. And really, Alumni Career Services is here to serve alumni in whatever kind of career development capacity you need. And no topic is off the table. So I can help with things like salary negotiation, having tough conversations, promotions, moving regions, etc. Whatever it is that you're doing or trying to figure out in your career, reach out to me. We'll figure out a way to plug you into current programs, work one-on-one, or connect you with someone who can better assist you. And we're here to help you, so don't hesitate to reach out to us anytime. All right, and I will turn it over now to Ashley. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Yuliya. I just want to give a quick plug for Yuliya and the services that she offers through Alumni Career Services. Please utilize her as a resource. It's really valuable to have someone as a sounding board, especially if you do need to have those difficult conversations in your workplace and you're not quite sure how to approach it. Give Yuliya a call. That's something that I've done myself, and we've had many great phone conversations, some with me in tears, but end with me feeling encouraged and empowered with my next steps. So definitely utilize her as your resource. Thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar. Today we're talking about the hidden job market. We're talking about why most of the jobs out there are never posted for us to even see, and how we can access them without having someone we already know within the organization. So an overview of what we're going to touch base on this webinar today is, first of all, understanding why the hidden job market exists and how you can access it. We're going to talk about what an informational interview actually is and why you should do them. And then I'd also like to talk a little bit about how you can formulate an effective elevator speech to really be sure that you're giving the best first impression possible when you go out and introduce yourself in the world. To start us off, let's talk a little bit about why this topic matters. It matters because it's true. Employers prefer to hire based on referrals. Number one, it's more cost effective. They don't have to pay to hire advertising. They don't need to start from zero, from scratch, looking for a good candidate to hire. And second, they also have more assurance or security with referrals because they have someone who can vouch for them. They already have a character reference. The question, do you know anybody who might be interested? That might be something that you've heard from an employer in the past. Do you have any friends in the industry who are looking for jobs? And that's a common question that employers are going to ask their valued team members. And that's because they want to hire more people like you. So it's a compliment. But yeah, definitely this is a real issue, and it's something that we want to confront head on so that we can know how to best access these job opportunities. This concept is really about seeing what we're doing as making your own luck and not just throwing up your hands and saying, well, if you have to know somebody, it's pointless for me to even try. That's not the attitude that we want to approach this issue with. We want to see it as, okay, we know that referrals have a higher chance of getting the job, so let's get referred. Let's make our own luck. We know from research across the board that referred candidates are twice as likely to get an interview. So you're going to get a seat at the table, get the opportunity to introduce yourself in person and really show yourself for who you are. And referred candidates are 40% more likely to be hired because, again, employers have that assurance that you're going to be a strong candidate with good, strong work ethic that they already have a character reference for. A lot of people, when they start thinking about networking, they think about conferences and business cards and having to shake hands and introduce themselves over and over again, and it's a little bit intimidating. And I'm here to tell you that that's not the only kind of networking you can do. There are some networking habits that I want to talk to you about that you can incorporate into your daily life that can become second nature. It doesn't have to seem fake or put on. I want to encourage you to network proactively and not just when you need a job. We have some poll questions to go along with this presentation so that we can learn a little bit more about who's listening today and what your needs are. So our first poll question, who out there is currently looking for a job? Whether you're in one, whether you're between jobs, or just keeping an eye out for new opportunities. So take a quick minute and answer that poll for us if you don't mind. Thank you. And while you're doing that, I'll just give a quick talk about what networking is not. Networking is not just about having a group of people around you that you can ask favors. Networking is about establishing real relationships with people within your industry that can be symbiotic, that can be reciprocal, where it's a give and a take. So I definitely want to encourage you to give before you get. And be a good friend, be a good colleague before you start asking for favors of these members of your network.
I think the results are in, so we can look at those.
All right. Yeah, Greg, do you mind sharing what our poll results have to say?
Yes, 82% have said yes, and 18% said no.
Nice. Okay, so a strong majority of us out there are looking for new opportunities. So that's great. This information definitely applies to you, and I'm glad you're here. So thanks for taking the time out of your day.
And I wanted to just jump in here too. I think that what you shared, Ashley, is really valuable. This idea of it's a relationship and it's not asking for favors. And information interviews is something I talk about with in pretty much every conversation I have with alumni about how do you successfully break into a company or industry or region. And it really is the number one way to go about it, which is why I'm really glad that we're doing this webinar on the topic now. And even there's just thinking about our own relationship and how we've developed our connection. We met working in the same place, and then we had coffee together when Ashley first started, and then we've just stayed in touch very casually. And at least for me, I've never felt like, oh, we're like taking from each other. It's always been just this ongoing like mini conversation. And so for me, that's what it's about. It's about relationships. And we think about any goals that we have, relationships are going to help us no matter what, generally speaking, no matter what the goal is. So I wanted to tie that in. And Ashley, maybe you can share your side of things too, as to like how that's helped you as well.
Oh, absolutely. That actually leads in really well to the next slide, because we're really just talking about habits to incorporate into your daily work life that don't feel unnatural, that come across organically as you're being a good colleague and giving people the time of day and the attention that they deserve. So yeah, I always think about the time of my life when I met Yuliya, because she did something really interesting. When I first started at Oregon State in the Office of International Admissions, she wasn't working directly with me. Our roles didn't even really interact too much, but she took the time to reach out to me within my first couple of weeks on the job, and we spent about half an hour at coffee, just introducing herself, telling me what her role was, and how it might possibly interact with my new job. And what that did was started us off on a great foot. For one, now I have a friendly face in my organization. We're at a place where I didn't have any friends yet, so it was a good place to start. It introduced her as an accessible person that I could go to when I had questions, and I did. And I definitely used that. And what's neat is that introduction set us up on a really strong professional relationship that followed us through a myriad of different roles that we later had. Yuliya's career has really grown and shaped itself over the years. And I have taken on positions at other universities, at a different organization. And throughout it all, we've maintained our connection. And it started with something really simple, introducing herself to a new hire. So that's one tip that I'd like to share with you today, is when new hires are introduced to your organization, a lot of times it's by email. You know, the hiring manager will send out a brief intro to say, hey, welcome this new team member. Go out of your way to find them on LinkedIn. Connect with them on LinkedIn and send them a quick note, letting them know that you're happy they're joining the team and that you think they're going to like it there. Extend some goodwill toward them, and that will start you off on the right foot. I also encourage you to take a page out of Yuliya's book and share with them what your job is and how it's going to interact with their new position. This could be a really short 15-minute chat once they've had a chance to start their job and have been in it for a couple of weeks that could really make a big impact. Something else I want to encourage you to do is to stay in touch with departing colleagues. Many times when our colleagues are taking another job and moving on, they'll send out a mass email to the whole roster And a lot of times they'll leave a link to their LinkedIn or maybe the new organization they're going to, but at the very least, a personal email address. Send that email address a quick note. Let them know that you enjoyed working with them. Say something encouraging, wish them well in their new role. And now that you've sent that email, you now have their contact information should you ever need it. And you're making sure that they're leaving the organization on a positive note from you, that you wish them well. All of those little things matter. I encourage you also to utilize LinkedIn. As their new position is posted on LinkedIn, send a congratulations. Think of this as a way that your network just grew to now encompass this new organization that they joined.
And I'll step in here as well. So I think, so for Ashley and I would say there's probably a period of maybe 2 years where we didn't really interact very much, but we did stay in touch via LinkedIn. So occasionally, like if I had something going on, she would comment or post about it. And then if she had something going on, so we would just stay in touch really lightly. It really doesn't take a lot of effort, but just to say like, oh, hey, I recognize that you're doing well, or I recognize that this is going on for you. And it can help to maintain that relationship. And we're not advocating that you're just like best friends with everyone. I mean, Ashley's wonderful and I definitely consider her a friend, but like, you know, it's not something that you have to do like all the time. It's just little touch points that let the other person know like, oh, great job. I see that. I recognize it, or whatever it is that you're commenting on.
Absolutely. Thanks for adding that. And then lastly, please keep ties at past organizations when you're the person leaving. Don't burn those bridges. This is your past experience, your past organizations, coworkers, supervisors. This is all a part of your network and your professional life. So please do what you can to keep those relationships healthy and leave on a positive note. I encourage you to do what you can to stay in touch with friendships that you establish at past jobs. Check in with past supervisors and express your appreciation. That can go a long way. And then, my last thought for this page is just to consider your growth change, a growth of your own network and not a reset. So don't just think new job, new me, and try to shake off all the other people you've known. You don't need to start from square one. You have already built yourself a network. So please consider that.
So we have a question that came in, and I'll read it. It says, I reached out to my connections on LinkedIn and had a friend refer me to a position at her company. I've applied for jobs at the company and never got an interview. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I want to reach out to my friend again, but I don't want to come across as annoying. Thoughts?
That is such a good question, and it's something that I think comes up quite a bit. For one, getting the referral from a friend is really, it's not a ticket to a job. It does increase your chances, which is fantastic, and gives you a lead. From there, the ball is in your court. I would encourage you to stay in communication with your friend, of course, but it's really not the responsibility of your friend to move your application forward in the process or to intervene on your behalf. In fact, that might even be looked down on in the organization. So do what you can to capitalize on the referral. Please make sure that you mention your friend's name, mention how you found out about the position, of course, but then take that time to make sure that your resume and your application is really shining and can stand on its own merit, on its own 2 feet. So that's a really good point. The referral isn't the golden ticket, but it can definitely help you get in the door.
Yeah, and I see this question a lot. And I work with people who are struggling to get into a company and trying to figure out, okay, what can I do? So the thing about connecting with someone and reaching out for them for a job, ideally, in all cases, if you're able to have a relationship with someone that's not about job searching, that's the best thing first. And so you would essentially this is why Ashley's talking about networking habits in general, and not just like networking things for getting a job, but it's habits. So ideally, you would be having a variety of different kinds of relationships and connections where you're welcoming people, you're maybe doing coffee, you're doing various things. And then when you do see a position, what I recommend is that then you reach out to the friend and say, hey, I'm doing some exploration right now. Can I speak with you about what it's like at your company? What is your experience like? Are you enjoying your job? What kind of cool things are you doing? So you're still focusing on them and their experience, and you're building that relationship. I've had the experience, and I'm sure other people have as well, where someone reaches out to you and is like, oh, I saw your job posting. I want to apply. Can you get me in? And generally speaking, that form of referral seeking is not as optimum, because for most people, there's just this natural barrier that comes up. It's like, oh, well, now it's like, oh, you just want to talk to me because you want this job, instead of, okay, hey, Yuliya, I saw that you have this new job at so and so. Can I ask you some questions about it? What is it like? Could we do coffee or something? Or can I talk to you for 15 minutes on the phone? Something like that. And then that allows me to say, oh, let's say if it's Ashley, oh, Ashley, we have this position, and et cetera. And then it's like I get to share about it, or she can ask me questions later about the position. But it's this balance of like relationship building. And Ashley will talk more about how to actually do that, but hopefully that answers your question. The other thing is, the person who asked that question, reach out to me, and we can do a phone call, or if you're nearby, we can have coffee and we can talk more about what are some things you can do to build up those connections, and what can you do specifically in your particular situation. So I'd love to help you out.
Thanks, Yuliya. It's really helpful.
We have another question, so I'll go ahead and read it. I'm starting to build my own network. What can I do to stay in contact with a person I met in a networking event? I sent a LinkedIn invitation, but this new contact does not reply or accept invitations at LinkedIn. Should I insist in another way?
That's such a great question. Thanks for asking it. Yes, I think you need to pursue a connection in another way, and try to pursue a connection that has a little bit more tie-in to your conversation with that person and the event that you attended. So sending a request on LinkedIn sometimes can come through pretty anonymously, or without much tie to the source of where you two met. And so I could see how an invitation like that might not be responded to. On LinkedIn, it's fairly easy to find an email address, or if you met them at a networking event, I'm sure there was perhaps a business card or a link to the organization that they worked at. So I encourage you, if LinkedIn isn't working, to seek out their email. And in your follow-up, reference what you guys talked about. Reference the connection or something specific that happened in your interaction that they will remember. Tie it in with maybe a bit of advice they gave you or something that they said. Show that you listened, and that can be it. Really just, thanks for introducing yourself. I enjoyed our conversation. I'm happy to be connected on LinkedIn, or I'm happy to have your email address so that we can stay in touch. I think that personal tie-in to what the interaction was like is really key here, because that jogs their memory. And it'll jog your memory too, months down the road, when you want to go back to that contact and try to remember what you guys talked about. So it's a nice way to kind of keep a log in your email as well.
Yeah, those are all really great points, Ashley. And I would say one practice that I do that helps me keep track of things is I write down on the business card where I met them and just a couple brief notes. It can be really short, like it can be like 3 words, things that can pop out at you. So LinkedIn is really great for those messages. And for me, so I've stopped keeping track of how I know people besides LinkedIn. And so I just, that intro email for me lets me know how I met them, what we talked about, what might be some things we can talk about in the future. So another thing to keep in mind, well, actually 2 more things to keep in mind. First is that some people just aren't on LinkedIn very often. So some people set up an account and then never follow up. So if you're able to get a business card with their actual email address on there, that's best. I always try to connect with every single person I meet on LinkedIn, at least if it's someone that I think like, oh, we could have a great connection in the future. So definitely connect on LinkedIn, but that shouldn't be the only way that you reach out to someone if you think that connection is really important. And then the second point is that you so while LinkedIn is great, it's not going to be the sole thing that you follow up on. And so do you use an email?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I encourage that because LinkedIn, it's an app on my phone that sometimes I lump in with social media, but what I definitely check every day is my email. And I make sure I'm responding quickly. And so I think that's true of a lot of professionals, that they'll respond more to an email.
Yeah, and actually I just thought of another thing. So when we're building up our network, I think especially in the early on days, we might really attach a lot of meaning to like one interaction, one person, one connection. But ideally, what you would be doing is you would be making so many connections in a variety of different ways in a very organic format that for me, if someone doesn't respond to me, I just respect that and just leave it. Like, okay, great, they don't have time or something's going on, and just leave it at that. And if basically any point of desperation at all during any part of this will come out and people will see it. And so I know I've been at the point of people being desperate at me. I'm sure Ashley has had people be desperate towards her, and all of us, I think, have at some point have felt that. And so being very easygoing about it, knowing that it's still important to you, knowing you did your part by reaching out to them on LinkedIn and via email, and then just leaving it at that. It's okay. You're going to be creating lots of different kinds of relationships across the board. And so it's okay if someone doesn't respond. Who knows? Maybe they just had a baby and they're like swamped. We don't know. We really don't know what's happening in their life to keep them from responding to your LinkedIn message.
Absolutely. Okay, so that was a really good introduction into what we're going to talk about next, informational interviews. So really, to echo what Yuliya was just talking about, an informational interview is not a job interview, and it's not a time to ask for a job. Since we're just introducing this concept now, I'd like to do another poll question and see who has had experience with international or with informational interviews, or who is at least familiar with this topic. And Yuliya, just to circle back on what you said about the being able to sense desperation if somebody is coming at you a little too strong with their hopes of connecting and building their network and asking for a job. You're right. It's a little bit of a turnoff because you're starting the relationship by asking for something and asking for a favor before you've established a rapport. So I really want to encourage you to focus on the rapport first, the relationship first, before you ask for a favor or for a job. So when we're talking about informational interviews, we're really talking about an active, a proactive part of the research phase as you're looking for a new job, a new organization or industry to join. So think about it like that. Think about it like you're doing a research paper, perhaps, and this is an interview that you're conducting. The end goal is not to find out about the job openings that aren't posted or to see how you can get an in their organization. It's really just to learn, to ask questions and to listen.
All right, so the results are in, and just about 90% of you have heard about informational interviews.
Yeah,
which is great.
That's fantastic.
That's really good. It's kind of a buzzword these days because we've seen that it works.
I definitely use it.
Yeah.
The word every day.
And if you're doing it right, it should be enjoyable for both you and the person that you're interviewing. It shouldn't be a chore for either of you. And part of that being is people can recognize when you really genuinely are interested in their job, them as a person or their career, and they like to help people and they like to talk about their own path. So we're going to go through some really practical tips on how to make informational interviews both effective and pleasant. So what does an informational interview look like? So think about an interview and just wipe that image out of your mind. It's not you wearing your blazer and showing up with your resume and speaking to someone in a boardroom. Ideally, it's pretty informal. It can be at a coffee shop, it can be in their office, it can even be a walking talk, if you've ever done one of those, which can really take away
I
some of
personally
the
love
pressure.
those. That's what I've been doing with like all new hires. It's just like a walking meeting.
Walking meeting.
It's great.
It's fantastic because if you're a little bit nervous and maybe aren't sure that you want to be maintaining eye contact for that long, a walking meeting is great because it gives you something else to be doing.
I was just thinking, I love what you said, like information interview, it's not an interview. So maybe it needs a rebranding. Maybe it's an informational conversation. Just thinking out loud here.
Absolutely.
And not an interview. Because it makes it sound so formal.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, it's not well, ideally it's not super formal.
Not super
It's a
formal,
conversation.
not written questions that you're taking, crazy notes on the whole time, although you should take notes.
You could be. It could. I'm definitely guilty of being a really heavy note taker. So
I know that about you.
Yeah.
Okay, so what they actually look like, please make these informational interviews or conversations on their terms. These shouldn't be events where you're asking the other person to drive a long way or meet you near your work. Please make it convenient for them. I usually encourage a coffee shop close by, even their own office if it works out. But just remember that this is a favor that they're doing for you that doesn't really coincide with their job responsibilities. And so just remember that it's a favor and try to make it easy on them. And then secondly, these can be short. A 30-minute informational conversation is plenty. Yuliya and I were talking that many of these conversations we've had have been 15 minutes.
15 minutes, that's a pretty typical.
Mm-hmm.
I've done a lot of 15-minute, especially if the person's prepared.
Yep. If you're prepared, you can make 15 minutes very effective.
Mm-hmm.
Also, a short appointment is a lot easier to fit on a busy person's calendar. So it'll be a lot easier for them to say yes to you. So you're kind of making it easier for them to be there by, coming to them, and you're making it easier to get on their calendar, but making it short. Another thing I wanted to talk about too is you don't need too much time because as Yuliya and I were talking, most hiring decisions are made within 90 seconds of even meeting someone.
True, 90 seconds.
That's crazy. So that's why that first impression is so pivotal, so important, and why you really don't need that much time to be asking of someone if you're initiating one of these informational interviews.
And I want to kind of tie into that 90-second thing too, because it sounds really intimidating. Okay, 90 seconds. Whoa, that's how long I have. But actually, it's a liberating idea because, and actually we'll talk more about elevator speeches and how to create an effective introduction of yourself, but that means that you get to own how you come into a conversation. That first 90 seconds, typically you get to introduce yourself, or you hear someone else introduce themselves, and then you introduce yourself. And so that's great. That means you can frame that to be something positive, energizing, engaging, and that gives you a lot of power over what does that 90-second look like. Now, obviously, with anything dealing with humans, like there could be an element of messiness and whatever, but I think it's actually a great thing if you can be thoughtful about how you introduce yourself, which Ashley will share more about that later.
Oh, I love that feeling of being empowered because you're more in control of the first 90 seconds because you can do some really practical steps to make sure that first impression is the best possible. You can be on time or early. Your pre-informational interview conversation can be professional and prompt responses. You can extend your hand for a handshake and smile. All of these things are easy and they all tie into a really positive first impression.
Well said.
So yeah, let's talk about the the introduction, introducing yourself in 30 seconds. This is something that you can practice. Don't think of this as something you have to just innately know about yourself and do on the fly every time. Really, introducing yourself is a skill. And I encourage you to take the time to think critically about the words you're using to describe yourself and yeah, what you're choosing to include in those first 30 seconds. After you are done with this webinar, of course, please practice. Introduce yourself using only 30 seconds. Maybe use your phone's recorder and set a timer for 30 seconds. And then as you're reviewing it, look back and be like, okay, what did I choose to include? And what do those pieces of information say about me? Like if somebody has a totally blank slate, they don't know anything about you, what can they now assume about you based on what you said? Another thing that Yuliya and I were talking about is the ability to frame or reframe your own experience and what has happened to you, and make sure that you are presenting your past experience in the best possible light. You don't necessarily have to give all the nitty-gritty details, and you definitely don't need to go in chronological order of your life history. But yeah, being choosy, pruning, editing, and trying to frame your past experience to make sure that it is presenting yourself in the best possible way.
And I'd like to share a story about that, because this is something that ends up coming up a lot in conversations about how to reframe your story in a way that's really more empowering and true to you. Mm-hmm. So we're not saying omit the details that really matter, but we're saying that you reframe it so that it's consistent with where you see yourself going in the future. So I worked with one woman who, for a variety of reasons, she was let go of her job about a year ago, and there was a new manager, the company was bought out, and that's pretty common with when companies are bought out. There's a lot of shifts and cultures change, and so it's not always a good fit for a person, whether they choose it or the company chooses. And so obviously there was a lot there. I mean, a lot of struggles, a lot of feelings about the position. And so we practiced together how to reframe her story in a way that was empowering and gave her a sense of hope for the future and her passions and where she was wanting to go. And I typically do a 3-week check-in with people after I meet with them. And before that time was even up, she called me on a Friday, and it was like one of the best phone calls I've ever gotten, because it was Friday and it was like, busy week. And she's like, Yuliya, I got a job. I reframed. She did 2 things. She reframed, and then she asked the person. So she was like networking and doing all these things, and then she asked the person that she was interviewing with, how can I help you with the goals that you have for your own position too? And the reframing in that got her a job after a year of searching, and being laid off is really challenging. So it's a really, really powerful tool to reframe. And reach out to me if you want assistance with like how do I reframe your story. And Ash and I have practiced that together too. Like this is something that is, I think, a really fun part of my job, is helping people re-see their career and their life in a way that moves them forward in a positive way and an empowering way.
Yeah. And I can vouch for that too. Just the helpfulness of that, to hear somebody else reframe your experience in a way that doesn't deter from your value or your potential. So because Yuliya and I know each other and she knows my story, she was able to do a little role play and tell and say back to me how she would reframe my story. And I loved it. So yeah, please use her as a resource. She's fantastic. Some other things about introducing yourself in 30 seconds that I've had to learn. Choose what things to omit, what things to leave out. You're not being dishonest if you don't, tell everything from high school onward. You're being thoughtful. So really choose the items that you want to have in these first 30 seconds. And then another thing, be careful about what you choose to say first and what you choose to say last in this 30-second elevator speech, because those are the things that people tend to remember. First impression and then how you close. All right. What do you actually talk about during an informational interview? Please take some time to think this one through. I have a story to tell along these lines where I had a connection reach out to me for an informational interview, and she did everything right. The introduction email was fantastic. She explained to me what she was doing, why she wanted to talk to me, why she was interested in my industry. She set up a time to meet. When we got there, she was there early. She paid for the lunch, and she even brought a small thank you gift. So all the pieces were in place, and it could have been a fantastic experience, except for there were no questions. She didn't know what to ask or how to steer the conversation. And I found myself feeling a bit like it was a waste of time. Not from any other thing that she did, but just from the fact that I could tell there weren't any questions prepared in advance, and she didn't really have a clear direction for where she wanted the conversation to go. So this part is very important, to take the time beforehand to ask questions. And just think about it. When you first sit down after you've introduced yourself, the first thing they're going to ask is, so what do you want to know? And be prepared to answer that.
Yeah, and I would say the best ones I've had, they've had maybe 3 to 5 questions prepared, and we go through them, and I say, do you have any other questions? And then they say, oh, I have this one or I don't, and that seems to work really well, like about 3 to 5.
Mm-hmm. And the second piece about having an effective conversation that flows well is to be a great listener. So please practice active listening skills. Nod, acknowledge, and clarify, but please don't interrupt. You're here to listen and learn from them. And then I also want to encourage you to resist that urge to tie everything back to your own experience. This is something that's so tempting for a lot of us if we hear something that we relate to. But please remember that this is not about you. It's not about sharing about your past or your experiences. It's really about learning from them. So do your best not to interrupt and to just hear what they have to say.
And we have a question about your elevator pitch and getting started in your career. So the question is, how do you adequately introduce yourself when you are not yet part of an organization, or if you don't have this specific job title that you want to describe yourself, or you're not even sure where you are headed in your career field?
That is such a good question, and something that I've struggled with myself, especially if you don't feel like your job title adequately depicts yourself or your potential or where you want to go. So in this case, I would say try to describe yourself for your interests, your values, and your hopes for the future. So while you don't necessarily know a very specific place that you want to go in your career, you know some things. You know what's important to you, and you know what about their position or their organization that is interesting to you. So highlight those things. I've done a lot of work with undergraduate students as they practice their interview skills, and I can't tell you how many I've had that have started out with my name, my major, and my year. And that kind of information is kind of like non-information because it doesn't give any real concrete detail about who you are as a person and what you want for your future. So try to be a little bit more specific about that.
Yeah, and I think that actually being in a position where you're not sure where you're going, that may actually be even a better way forward for an informational interview, because what you could do is you could say, I'm really excited. I'm excited to have this conversation with you. I'm doing a lot of exploration right now. Here's some things I'm exploring and thinking about, and talking with you helps me to get a better understanding of where things are at. Here are some things that I have explored already. And then the other thing is that you definitely don't have to introduce yourself with your job title or where you work or anything like that. And typically when people are looking to switch, what I would recommend doing is, if you have some kind of a volunteer experience, or if you have something at your work that you're involved in, or a professional association or something like that that you're involved in, you can actually talk about that and highlight those experiences that do move you closer towards your goal than what you're currently doing. And that can be very helpful. And there's different formulas online that you can research of like what to structure your intro speech with. And one of those is saying, here's what I'm hoping to do or what I'm hoping to learn. And it doesn't have to be very specific. It can be pretty general, as long as it's positive and connects to the person that you're talking with in some way.
Absolutely. I think connecting to the person you're talking with is key, and making it clear what you hope to learn and why you're connecting with them specifically.
Yeah.
And we did receive one more question about the questions. So do you have a good list of questions or a go-to resource for good questions for your informational interview?
I'm glad you asked. We'll switch to the next slide and just talking about some ideas. And these, I actually sought out one of my connections. So it's a past colleague that I worked with at Willamette University, Sarah Kutin, who just recently accepted a position with University of Oregon. And so now her network has changed, as has mine, but we've stayed in contact. And she was able to be a resource for me as I was researching this topic, and shared some of the questions that she developed as she's been in charge of career management for MBA programs in Oregon. So some questions to prepare in advance. I have a couple ideas related to the job and about their career in particular. So some questions that you can ask about the job. Again, like Yuliya said, please try to keep this positive. You're in charge of the tone here because you're steering the conversation, and it is such a short window of time that you have with this person. So ask them what they appreciate most about their job. You'll get the conversation moving. Everyone will be more warmed up and comfortable, and this is a pretty easy question to start off with. Ask them why they chose the industry. This is a great question for those of us who aren't quite sure what industry they want to pursue. So this will be very applicable to you and helpful. And then Yuliya and I had a great brainstorming session as we were talking about this next one, how to pick up on the company culture. Because we discovered that just asking off the bat, what's the company culture like? You're not going to get the answer you want. You're going to get fine, or something a little bit just not as descriptive or not as true.
Or an idealized version, like who they hope to be. And that's not always who they actually are.
Yeah.
It could be, they could be not correlated.
So the things that we were thinking of how to ask this question in a more roundabout way is saying something like, in my past experience, I've experienced quite a bit of turnover in my roles and restructuring. And that can be kind of an uncomfortable place to be in an organization. Can you tell me about a time when your organization has gone through some restructuring and how it was handled? And this might be a great way for them to think about a time where their company or organization was under stress or strain. And from their description of how it was handled, you might be able to pick up some clues of what the company culture is like.
Yeah, and in that case, they may see that as like you're trying to find something negative from them. And so another option for that same sort of question could be, I'm really interested, one of the things I'm really interested in, I'm just practicing pretending to be the person. I'm really interested in just how organizations function through change. We have a lot of change in our society, lots of technological change. So I'd love to know more from you how your organization in the past has dealt with change. Have you had big changes, and how has it dealt with those changes.
Mhm.
And then to just hear them out and to hear the kind of words that they're using to describe how they function.
I love that. That's a great way to reframe, to make sure that you're keeping it positive and not just looking for dirt.
Yeah.
That's not our intention. And then secondly, you can ask questions particular to them and their personal career path. These don't have to be too personal, of course, but questions like, where did you work before this? And you'll be surprised at how these kind of questions can lead you down really interesting topics where you learn things about them that you never would have known even from their LinkedIn profile, and you're hearing it from them. Along the same lines of keeping it positive, what has been your greatest achievement thus far? This question will tell you quite a bit about this person's values and what they see as important in their own work.
I love that question. Such a good one.
Thanks. And then lastly, who has helped you get to this point? Have there been influencers in your life that have mentored you or referred you for positions? So this question could be a really good segue into conversations about mentorship or conversations about referrals, but you're leading into it with, more organically with a question geared toward their career path. And so we talked a little bit about how you're definitely not allowed to ask for a job during an informational interview. And we want you to hold off on asking for favors right off the bat. Remember, this is about creating rapport with people in your network and establishing relationships first. But some things that you are allowed to ask, you're allowed to ask for advice. That's really what I hope you get out of this webinar, is that these informational interviews is a time to ask for advice and seek counsel. You have to be a little bit humble in this situation because you're really admitting that you don't know and that you want to glean from them what advice they can share. You can ask for referrals. I encourage you to not end an informational interview without asking, is there anyone else I should be speaking with?
That's perfect. Yep.
Yeah.
Every one of them could end that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then third, ask for connection. So I think it is so kind when people ask for permission to connect on LinkedIn or ask for permission to follow up with more questions by email. Because most people, if you ask that, they'll be so taken aback with your politeness and your kindness that they'll say, of course, definitely. And in that, because you asked and because they said yes, you're more likely to get a response to that follow-up. Leading into how do you follow up from an informational interview, because your work isn't done when it's over. Express appreciation because they did you a favor. They spent time out of their workday probably to do something for you that they didn't have to. And build connection. So say thank you. This can be an email, a quick phone call. Yuliya over here is great at writing short little handwritten notes. I've been getting these for the past 5 years and I love them, and it's such a nice touch, and nobody really does it anymore. So it's a good way for you to stand out, because not everybody is going to jot down a handwritten thank you note for something like this. And then, of course, our old standby, connect on LinkedIn. And don't just connect, because I get quite a few connection requests on LinkedIn from people that I don't recognize right away. And so my habit is to click on it, and then you'll get a brief summary of who the person is and where they work. And if I can't tell in the first minute or so how I'm connected with them, I may or may not accept the invitation. So you want to connect and add a note, and please do it in a timely way so that they remember your face. They know how they're connected with you. And then don't just go silent. Engage with them. Comment on things that they post, share share relevant content, and just stay on their radar. That's a way for you to not disappear, to stay top of mind, and hopefully the goal is that down the line they'll think of you when it's time to refer someone for a job that you might be interested in. And by this time, they'll know if you're interested in it because you've taken the time to sit down with them and have a one-on-one. So in summary, a healthy network leads to referrals, and referred candidates tend to get noticed. It's not a golden ticket, it's not a guarantee, but research has shown that you have a higher likelihood of getting an interview and getting hired if you're referred. You can use informational interviews to build that network, and think of these conversations as a time for research and a time to learn about another person, their job, and their industry. And lastly, a well-developed elevator speech ensures that you are representing yourself effectively every time and not leaving that first 90 seconds up to chance. So thank you so much for joining us today on this webinar. I really enjoyed this topic, and I hope that you did too. And I'll hand it over for some closing thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. That was wonderful, Ashley. Thank you. Everything you shared, I definitely second all of that, and I highly recommend that you pull at least the things that you feel are the most relevant to you and follow up on a couple things from what Ashley shared. Some next steps for you to consider is do think about joining our OSU LinkedIn group for OSU alumni, students, or faculty and staff. It's our Beaver Careers LinkedIn group, and the link is right there. And if you message me one takeaway from the webinar, you'll be entered to win a free career consultation. We've done this for every webinar, and every webinar we've had a winner or two. So go ahead and email me or send me a LinkedIn message, and you'll be entered to win. And then we have a new career webinar coming on October 4th, also with Ashley and Kyle. So both of them are alumni career ambassadors, and it's going to be about 6 ways to boost your personal brand to get a promotion. The content's fantastic. I'm really excited to be promoting this, and lots of people have the goal of getting a promotion or getting some kind of an increase in like their salary or their position or moving to a different company or whatnot. And the content they're going to be sharing is going to be applicable to you whether or not that is your goal. But definitely if you're wanting to get promoted, this would be a great webinar to attend. And then please do feel free to follow up with me if you have any questions or would like further assistance. I'm always happy to help. One of my mottos is to engage in what matters and to help others engage in what matters to them. And so if these sorts of things are valuable and important to you, whether it be for your own professional career goals or if you want to figure out a way to help other people, I would be really glad to meet with you or talk with you or email and connect that way. So reach out anytime. And I'd like to say thank you so much to Ashley for presenting. It's been amazing. And thank you, Greg, for facilitating the questions and the polls. And thank you, everyone, for attending this great webinar.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ashley and Yuliya. That was great. Very informative. So I did want to give some a little bit information about PACE. We talked about professional continuing education here at OSU. And the reason we like to partner with the Alumni Association is to hear from the alumni because it's just such a great connection, and OSU is spread throughout not just Oregon, but the US and beyond. And we can offer these great educational opportunities for personal enrichment and professional development. For PACE, each program is designed for working professionals, so you can take individual classes or enroll for the whole certificate and complete the program in less than a year. Well, that was great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.